With the majority of Americans handing Donald Trump the keys to the White House, they also gave him a get-out-of-jail-free card. Let's be clear, Trump was always running to stay out of prison. Yesterday, Judge Tanya Chutkan granting Jack Smith's request to vacate deadlines in Trump's federal election interference case in D.C., likely the first step in the process of ending the prosecution there. That motion comes after NBC News reported that this week the DOJ would be moving to wind down the 2 federal criminal cases against the president-elect. Meanwhile, in New York, a November 26th sentencing date remains on the calendar, with yet another unprecedented situation to be handled by Justice Juan Merchan. Joining me now is Joyce Vance, MSNBC legal analyst, former U.S. attorney in Alabama, and a co-host of the #Sisters-in-Law podcast. Joyce, it's been one hell of a week. And one of the major things that comes out of a Trump win, unfortunately, is the demise prematurely of criminal cases, specifically federal prosecutions at this point of Donald Trump. Should we expect something, though, from Jack Smith that could expose the extent of his criminality, even if these cases get dropped by the DOJ?
Right. So I'm going to say something, Katie, that will make me unpopular, but I'm going to say it anyhow. I think we're at a point where we need to be very careful about throwing democratic norms out the window, because we're going to need to hang on to them for the next 4 years to get through the next Trump administration. And the reason that I say that is that prosecutors, their job is not just to throw out the evidence in a case for the public to look at when a defendant doesn't have the opportunity to respond. So Jack Smith's goal here won't be what we might call dirtying up a defendant who's gotten away from him. That doesn't mean that there aren't legitimate considerations for Smith to make, though. He is a special counsel. Special counsels do write reports at the end of their investigations or cases, clarifying the work that they've done and explaining it. That's an opportunity to lay out some of their evidence, and we may well and likely should see Smith do that here, but in a very measured, reasonable way that's consistent with the rule of law, because we need that rule of law to stay in place, even though it's badly battered and damaged at this point.
Joyce, part of that rule of law also includes the sentencing component of a defendant who has been tried by a jury of his peers and found guilty in this case of 34 felonies in the state of New York. November 26th is right around the corner for Donald Trump. Do you expect to see the sentencing to move forward by Judge Merchan?
There's no reason that sentencing can't move forward. There's no reason that the judge can't impose a sentence. Probably a custodial portion, if Trump were sentenced to prison, could not be executed. There would be a supremacy clause issue there. But I think the judge can go ahead and sentence. The wild card here is whether Trump's lawyers might not go into court, try to take a preemptive strike, get an appellate court, say in the New York state system, to rule in their favor. So we'll wait and watch for that this week.
Joyce, one of the many hats you wear is also to share your legal brilliance with the Brennan Center. I've been getting a lot of calls on social media from viewers and from followers that are questioning the integrity of this election. They want to know why certain things are not being done, like a recount, for example, in certain states. I always defer to people that are smarter and more capable than me. I know this may be putting you, Johnny, on the spot, but I do want to ask you, Joyce, what you think about the kind of clamoring for the recounts. I mean, if nothing was wrong, then the recount would just solidify that nothing was wrong. But if something was wrong, would a recount be able to expose that? And is there some type of standard that needs to be met to be able to do that?
Well, look, Katie, this election was fair and it was freely held. And I will, like you, defer to greater expertise than my own in this area. Mark Elias, the campaign law guru who was overlooking everything for the Harris team, made a decision that there was no reason to challenge election results, no reason to ask for recounts, which are authorized under state law in certain circumstances when counts are close. This was not an election. And I, too, have heard the rumors and seen stuff circulating. I think that that's an echo of the Trump era, where it became popular to question the integrity of our elections. That really is something that we need to not do here. The election happened. Trump won fair and square. Now the question is, what are we going to do next?
So, for example, the Fulton County case, it's a state case, not a criminal case. Can the portion of that criminal case move forward with the non-Trump defendants? And then is it stayed against Donald Trump, considering the fact you can't criminally prosecute a sitting president?
Right. So that case is still on hold and is likely to remain on hold until well into the new year because there's a challenge over whether or not Fani Willis can continue with that case. If the panel that's considering that ultimately determines that Willis cannot stay on the case, a new Georgia prosecutor will be assigned to the case, and that will likely be a death knell for it. That happened with one defendant who was culled out from the herd early on. His case was reassigned to another prosecutor and went nowhere. So there's that possible path. The case could go back to Willis. She could move forward, and at that point, then President Trump's lawyers would bring a number of charges asking that the case be dismissed or at least be put on hold while he's in office. Look, you know, Georgia's courts, they did yeoman's work in the election, standing up for election process. This is sort of a different matter, and whether they would permit a case to go forward against a sitting president, I think is pretty unlikely.
Joyce Vance, I will say it again. The man ran to stay out of prison. He didn't run for the American people. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it.